Have you ever thought about quitting League of Legends because you were hard stuck in your elo? Are you tired of studying videos, watching pro level matches, and paying for premium access to websites just so you can learn about wave manipulation or attack trade patterns? Well, so was I. So I want to share with you what I've been doing differently in hopes that it will shift your mindset like it did for me, so that you'll stop worrying about winning every single ranked match and instead start seeking enjoyment with all the time that you spent playing League of Legends. Tired of my own shortcomings and wanting to stop blaming others for my losses, I decided to start playing League of Legends in a new way. One in which I'm not constantly stressed about winning. I'm no longer going to websites such as Mobalytics or Skill Capped, desperately scrounging for just the tiniest piece of information that'll give me that 1% edge over my opponents. So now I'm just playing simple characters, ones that are fun for me to use, and ones that have simple builds. Most importantly, the builds are fun to use at my elo, which is currently between silver and gold. So if that's a mode of play that you've already adopted, or if that's something that you're interested in, then I urge you to stick around, because not only will I introduce you to a Korean Malphite build that has been a blast to use, but I'll touch briefly on runes, items, summoner spells, power spikes, early, mid, and late game, as well as direct counters to Malphite. But more importantly, I hope that what you take away from this video is the ability to make this build your own and to enjoy playing League of Legends once again. First off, you're probably wondering why Malphite? Well, as you probably know, he always has huge impacts in team fights, and he's mechanically really simple to use. Maybe Garen is the only other champ that would be easier to use than Malphite. You know what, maybe I should look for a really fun Garen build to use. But anyways, back to Malphite's strengths. He's able to chunk towers really easily through the use of his abilities, Spellblade proc, and Nashor's Tooth attack speed increase. Factor in the addition of the Void Grubs this season with the true damage buff against towers that they provide you. And now you have a champion that the enemy team has to take seriously in the side lanes. Otherwise, they're going to be losing structures left and right. Additionally, and this is something you might not know or maybe you forget about, because we always think and see Malphite as a frontliner and a tank, but he can be built as a burst mage, and he can even be played as an assassin in mid game. But I'll talk about that more later on. So I originally found out about this build through Lol Dobby's YouTube channel, which I'll link in my description below. He posted this a few weeks ago, and as soon as I saw it, I had to jump into Summoner's Rift and start playing Malphite right away. This build, by the way, comes from a Korean Grandmaster, and I'm probably pronouncing this incorrectly, but I believe his name is Sid Kageno. And one of the great things about this build is that you don't need to make a whole lot of changes from game to game. First off, as far as runes, you're always going to want to take First Strike, Minion Dematerializer, and Cosmic Insight from the Inspiration Tree. Then from Domination, you're going to want to go Eyeball Collection and Ultimate Hunter. For minor runes, you're going to want to go Ability Haste and double health runes based on level. The only thing you really have to think about as far as runes is whether you want to take Magical Footwear or Triple Tonic from the Inspiration Tree. From my own experience, you want to take Magical Footwear whenever you think you won't be able to kill the enemy mid laner right at level 6. It's better to take the free boots and spend that extra gold you're saving in order to upgrade to Ionian boots ASAP. But if your opponent has low mobility, they're susceptible to gank setups, or they're just plain weaker than you and a 1v1 at level 6, then Triple Tonic is definitely your choice. The extra 20 ability power for 60 seconds is huge. You're essentially getting a free amp tome for a whole minute. That's a 400 gold item, by the way. Not to mention that you also get the extra true damage against minions at level 3 from the Elixir of Avarice, and you'll get an additional skill point at level 9 from the Elixir of Skill. That's a pretty insane value. Okay, summoner spells. Ghost and Teleport are going to be the only ones you'll ever need. I'll explain later why you only need these two, but for now, just know you'll never take Ignite or Flash, because you don't need these to be impactful as Malphite. You're going to want to go Sapphire Crystal and Refillable Potion. The main reason being is that you want to buy Lost Chapter ASAP. I'll get into item details in the next section, but for now, just know, in general, your build order is going to be Malignance, Boots, Lich Bane, Nashor's Tooth, Abaddon's Death Cap, and then a situational item. And it doesn't really matter who you're laning against, there's not too much variation in this build. The only thing that I would suggest from my experience is to build Ionian Boots ASAP when you use Magical Footwear. Ability Haste on your summoner spells as well as your ultimate just totally unlocks Malphite's ability to fight in the mid game. Okay, so speaking of items, let's go into power spikes. So everyone knows Malphite is really strong in the late game because of his team fighting ability. He can burst pretty much any squishy champion, but early and mid is where he really struggles. So you'll want to pay particular attention to your first couple of power spikes. First, you want to rush Lost Chapter ASAP. Malphite's abilities cost large percentages of your mana early on, so you'll want to balance spending your mana for last hitting versus making short trades against your opponent. And that's where Lost Chapter comes in. The AP, the ability haste, mana, and the 20% mana recovery at each level up are all essential to your laning phase. In a lot of games, just having completed Lost Chapter will net you enough damage right at level 6 in order to win the all-in against your opponent. And let me tell you, nothing feels better than starting to chunk your opponent at level 5 and knowing as soon as you hit level 6, you're going to be receiving that Elixir of Force and your ultimate ability in just a few seconds. Because that's when the party starts and the enemy will start seeing gray screens every time your ultimate is off cooldown. Now you might think Malignance is going to be your second power spike, and even though the additional AP and cooldown reduction do feel pretty good on Malphite, it doesn't really change how you interact with the map or with your laning opponent. So in my opinion, Lichbane is going to be your second power spike. Lichbane provides additional AP, on-hit magic damage with Spellblade, and 8% movement speed. I know most people talk about the Spellblade proc as being a huge boon to your character, but one thing people should talk about more is that extra 8% movement speed. If you think about it, Malphite has 335 base speed, and by the time you're completing Lichbane, you'll have already completed the Ionian boots, which give you an extra 45 movement speed. So 8% of 380 is going to be an additional 30 movement speed. That's more than what base boots provide. So not only will you be destroying champions, you'll be killing structures faster, and you'll be able to stick onto targets easier. Win, win, win. At the start of the game, landing Q with first strike is not really going to net you very much gold. It's more efficient to use it for last hitting minions. Let's think about it. First strike gives you 5 gold plus gold equal to 100% of the bonus damage dealt within 3 seconds of activating the rune. Bonus damage is basically 0 until you have Lost Chapter. Even then, your Q will do at most 40 bonus damage, which means 40 gold. But even then, that's not technically right because your opponent will have base magic resist just from their levels. All that to say that first strike from your Q is not really worth it until you have some items, unless you're going for a heavy burst trade with all 3 of your abilities within 3 seconds. So farming with Q is going to be the right decision the majority of the time. And just for reference, before 15 minutes, caster minions are worth 14 gold and melee minions are worth 21 gold, with the canyon minions giving you 60 gold. Okay, side note, if you take magical footwear, you want your first completed item to be Ionian boots. This gives you cooldown reduction on your ghost and teleport, which is huge because ghost is already a low cooldown spell. Plus, early on, if you take a bad trade, you can use ghost to get back to lane quickly. A useful strategy, and one that I've been trying to implement more, is to shove the lane as fast as you can so you can start roaming. Once you shove the lane, you have a short window to play like an assassin, like I had mentioned earlier. Make sure to use your sweeper to disable any wards that might reveal your location as you're traveling to bot lane or top lane. And don't be afraid to use ghosts when necessary in order to get to the gank in time. Your ghost and teleport will let you reach angles that the enemy team won't anticipate. And even if they do, you're likely to run them down with your Q and your movement speed. Then, once the play wraps up, you can base quickly, buy your items, and TP back to mid lane immediately to pick up the wave. Or if your health is high enough after the gank/skirmish, you can go directly to mid lane with your TP. The main thing is staying ahead or even with gold and XP is going to be crucial. Again, the laning phase is all about not getting behind of your lane opponent. It's not the end of the world if you get to mid game at a deficit, because once the game has progressed that far, you immediately provide more utility and become more impactful than you ever could during the laning phase. Pop them up with your R, you slow them with your Q, your teammates clean up. If you haven't burst them from 100 to 0, then you all take an objective together, rinse and repeat. That's really it. With your ability to clear waves with your W and your E, the damage that you'll have to burst down champions, and the way you'll be shredding through turrets, you're a real threat in the side lane. Remember that the Spellblade proc from Lichbane, plus your attack reset with W, and the attack speed from Nashor's Tooth are no joke once they're all combined. But if your team manages to engage, or they get caught out on the opposite side of the map, you can be there in 4 seconds to take over the fight. As I mentioned earlier, if you fall behind early on, you can still play as an engager for your team. But more than likely, you're not going to be able to burst anyone down. And you definitely won't be able to survive because you haven't built any tanky items. So just know that you'll probably have to sacrifice yourself in skirmishes and team fights in order for the team to follow up on your engage and wipe out the enemy team. But one very key thing you want to keep in mind is that if your teammates aren't calling out flash timers, then you want to use your ultimate slightly past the opponent. And when I say slightly past, I mean in the direction you think that they might flash to. Basically, you want your ultimate to land in the midpoint between where they are and where they could flash. That way you have a better chance of still catching them, because the worst feeling is when you ult, you miss the enemy, and then they just kite you to death because you can't kill them. So based on U.GG's data, in gold elo, you're most likely to run into Yone, Kali, and Silas, in that order. So these are good laning champs that you'll want to ban. Akali in particular is really strong this patch, so I consistently ban her whenever I have the chance. Malzahar is another champ who hard counters Malphite because he'll constantly harass you in lane. He'll get lane prio real easy, and he's got a strong ultimate to lock you down for ganks early on. However, he has an extremely low pick rate, so you're usually better off just playing defensive against him instead of spending a ban on him. So undoubtedly for me, this is one of the most enjoyable builds I've ever played.
Is it worth it?
Oh yeah, it's worth it. If you're strong enough.
You get to jump into the middle of every team fight. You can chase down squishies with your Q. You can crush towers in seconds when left unattended. Basically, Malphite is just a champ that lets you take over the game and have a whole bunch of fun doing it. You know, I mentioned Garen earlier in the video, so I'm really thinking I might pick him up and try a new build with him, especially since I don't have a backup at the moment in case Malphite ever gets banned. So I think Garen could be a solid backup. You guys think Garen is easier to use than Malphite? What's a good build for him? If you got one, I'd love it if you leave it in the comments. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you everyone for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.
I seen too many people leave.